Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 296 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about head coach Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL to be the new head coach of the LA Chargers. The Chargers have hired Harbaugh as their next head coach. He was previously the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, where he led them to a Super Bowl appearance where they ultimately lost to the Ravens, who are coached by his brother. For the last 9 years, Harbaugh had been the head coach of his alma mater, Michigan, and no one has had a more wild presence in college football. Well, there he's become a bigger and bigger personality. As you know, college football is a place where the coaches are the stars and the icons. For a while, he was the guy who couldn't beat Ohio State, and over the last few years, that changed, but this past year was pure madness. Harbaugh saw himself as the head of a cheating scandal as Michigan had a plant stealing signs from other teams, and if you have followed sports over the past decade, you know this is something that people get angry about. You had the Houston Astros scandal. You can go all the way back to the Patriots. For this, Harbaugh was suspended for the final games of college football's regular season, and in true Harbaugh fashion, and won his first national championship. Let's talk about what this hire means for the LA Chargers. Many are viewing this hire as a great thing for Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert, and you can see why. He's never really had a good head coach in the pros, but with this also comes real pressure. Everyone has always given Herbert the benefit of the doubt these past few years because the Chargers have been underachieving because the team had what many deemed the worst head coach in football, Brandon Staley, best known for going for it on fourth down. Also, he now has a head coach who famously replaced the quarterback who was having success. Alex Smith led the 49ers all the way to an NFC title game, and he replaced him with Colin Kaepernick. I'm not saying this is a Sean Payton, Russell Wilson situation, but it's something to keep an eye on. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a guy who is going to view himself as the face of the LA Chargers. It's no longer just, and I'm wondering how long these two can coexist. Like, I don't view Jim Harbaugh as the type of guy who's going to have the same quarterback for the next 5 seasons. I just don't know how that relationship is going to work out. Did John Harbaugh pick this job because it had Justin Herbert, or did he pick this job because the Chargers offered him the most money? That's something I'm really interested in, because if it is all about Herbert, that's a good thing for Herbert. But if it's about the money, then I could see Harbaugh wanting to bring in his own guy sooner rather than later. Justin Herbert is one of the most talented quarterbacks in all of football, but I see Jim Harbaugh as the type of guy who would replace that guy if he's not winning meaningful football games. Again, he replaced a quarterback who went to an NFC. I think Harbaugh is the type of guy who thinks he can win with any number of quarterbacks. I think he views himself in that Sean Payton way, and he's a guy who had success doing it. Again, he replaced Alex Smith when Colin Kaepernick, and it ultimately worked out for him. The Niners went all the way to the... I don't know if I really see things playing out this way, but I could definitely see people start to sour on Justin Herbert if he doesn't start winning football games with John Harbaugh now as his head. I'm just left wondering if Herbert will be the Chargers quarterback for Harbaugh's entire tenure with the LA Chargers. It's something to keep an eye on. I'm not saying it's going to play out that way, that he's going to replace Herbert, especially if they're having success. But again, Harbaugh is a guy who moves on from quarterbacks. I view him as a guy who thinks he can win with a lot of different kinds of quarterback play. I don't think he thinks he needs an all-pro level quarterback to win big football. So why exactly now is Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL? It could be for a lot of different reasons. One of them being he's done all he can do with college football. Another is the possibility of more punishments coming down the road in college football. In fact, when he was negotiating with Michigan, he was asking for protections against future sanctions from the NCAA. Jim Harbaugh is 60 years of age, and this is a 5-year contract. And during his stint with the Niners, Harbaugh kind of gave the impression that he's someone who succeeds early on and then his act gets kind of old. Now, it's possible things could be different for the Chargers, but I think the Chargers would absolutely love for a similar thing to play out here. They would absolutely love a Super Bowl trip under Jim Harbaugh. It doesn't need to be a great success for the entire 5 years. If he can have early success with Herbert and lead the Chargers on some great postseason runs, then this signing is an absolute. I think another interesting thing about all of this is there's some questioning if the Chargers picked the right head coach. Bill Belichick is out there. Bill Belichick, you remember him? The guy that most people think is the greatest football coach of all time. Now he's out there. He's a defensive-minded coach, and the Chargers' weakness last season was on defense. You can talk about Brandon Staley going for it on fourth down all you want, but that Chargers defense was terrible, and Bill Belichick clearly could have helped fix that. Now, Jim Harbaugh is an offensive-minded guy, and the Chargers were okay on offense. They're adequate. That's not their weakness. It's the defensive side of the ball I'm. And not only do you have Bill Belichick out there, you still have Mike Vrabel, a guy who I think had a great amount of success with the Tennessee Titans. He led them to an AFC title game. I don't understand why Mike Vrabel hasn't been hired already. Another name, Pete Carroll. I don't know what's going on with the Seahawks and Pete Carroll. That is a guy, if I were the Chargers, I would have absolutely loved to have been my head coach for at least 3 seasons. He's a guy who can clearly have success with a multitude. He went to the playoffs with Geno Smith. He revived his career, and he also made Russell Wilson look like a Hall of Famer. I mean, look at what Russell Wilson looks like now. Pete Carroll absolutely should have been in the conversation for the Chargers' next head coach. I'm not saying they picked the wrong guy. I'm just saying there were other really good candidates. But I think clearly what the Chargers wanted most was the splashiest name, and Jim Harbaugh is the splashiest name. He has a winning record in the NFL. He was 44-19 with the San Francisco 49ers, with Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith as his quarterback. 2 really good quarterbacks, but not on that level of Justin Herbert. I mean, Justin Herbert is more talented than both of those quarterbacks. The Chargers, to me, are in desperate need of stars and big personalities like Jim Harbaugh. I mean, look at what has happened to that organization since moving to LA. The Rams have become LA's team because they've been to 2 Super Bowls. They've won 1. They have Matthew Stafford. They have star players like Cooper Kupp. I mean, they have been way more exciting. They made the postseason this past year. The Rams have had way more success. And the Chargers look like the second place team, the little brother to the big brothers, and now they're trying to compete. They're bringing in Jim Harbaugh. That's drawing interest to the team. They have a young quarterback in Justin Herbert. They should be way more exciting than what they actually are, and this is a turn in the right direction to becoming that. They're not going to make the Super Bowl next season, but they need to make the postseason because I'm sick and tired of everyone saying the Chargers are that it team to begin the season, and then they become disappointing and don't even make the. When I first started to watch football, the Chargers were that it team. They had so much talent and they were exciting. They had LaDainian Tomlinson, arguably the greatest running back of this generation. He broke the They had Antonio Gates, a top 5 tight end of all time. Sean Merriman, one of the best defenders of his time. They had stars and they routinely made the playoffs. And yes, this is a team who hasn't made the Super Bowl since 1995, where they were blown out by the Niners 49-20. And you look at the quarterbacks who have played for the Chargers and you say, how did these guys not win a Super Bowl? They had Dan Fouts, a Hall of Fame quarterback. Phillip Rivers, who should make the Hall of Fame. And the only reason he's not really in that discussion all of the time is because he hasn't won a Super Bowl. He has all of the stats. Phillip Rivers is up there with every statistical category there is. What he's missing from his resume is a Super Bowl. And now, sadly, it feels like history is repeating itself. Justin Herbert has everything you want in a modern NFL quarterback. He can run the ball, he can pass the ball like anything, yet he's not winning big games. And it feels like it's a Chargers thing because there are a number of teams who could win Super Bowls with Dan Fouts, Phillip Rivers, and Justin Herbert. There's something about the Chargers, and it needs to turn around. And maybe, just maybe, Jim Harbaugh is the man. I mean, not to be rude about the Chargers, but I feel like most of the time people still call them the San Diego Chargers. Like they just haven't been paying attention to them since they moved to LA. And they have one of the best young and upcoming quarterbacks in Justin Herbert, and they've just been disappointing. I mean, the reason that we talk about them or they're talked about on TV is because of the weird coaching decisions Brandon Staley has made in the past, going for it on every single I'm excited for Jim Harbaugh to be with the Chargers, but this is something that I talked about last week on the podcast when I talked about Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys sticking with him. Making a coaching change isn't that drastic of a decision. It's not going to change the fortune of an entire football team. The Chargers aren't all of a sudden going to become Super Bowl contenders because of Jim Harbaugh. The roster is also going to have to change. I like the coaching decision. I think Jim Harbaugh is a far better coach than Brandon Staley. But how far that's going to take them, I don't know the answer to. I don't think Jim Harbaugh makes them a Super Bowl contender. Do I think that Jim Harbaugh could sneak into the postseason with this current iteration of the Chargers? Absolutely. But for them to become legitimate Super Bowl contenders, the roster is going to have to drastically. Because while, yes, their defense wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, they're still relying on older players like Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack is a really good player when he was in his prime. He's no longer that. And I 1,000% think that the Chargers should get Herbert more weapons. T. Higgins is a free agent. The Chargers should absolutely be in. And when it comes to free agency, the Chargers have to pick the right players because just a few off seasons ago, they picked cornerback J.C. Jackson, who was really successful in New England getting interceptions, but then he was nowhere to be seen by the time he was with the L.A. Chargers. That was a mistake. This team hasn't always spent their money wisely. With Jim Harbaugh as their head coach, they need to spend the money wisely if they want to become a Super Bowl contending franchise. Part of the reason how the Rams won the Super Bowl is how wisely they spent their money. They spent it on all the right veterans. I do wonder what the overall feelings towards Jim Harbaugh are right now. I feel like it's 50-50. Some people love the giant personality. Some people love the fact that he's winning against the establishment. And then there are others who thinks he's a cheater. I mean, he's kind of like a Bill Belichick type figure nowadays. He's winning a lot of football games, but some people are bringing up the past. Like with Bill Belichick, people still bring up Spygate. They still bring up Deflategate. They say he's a cheater. And I feel like Jim Harbaugh is kind of in that category now because of what went down. But then you're going to have NFL fans who don't care about that at all. I feel like if you're a fan of the Chargers, why would you care about what he did in college football? This is a new era for Jim Harbaugh. You're a team, you have Justin Herbert, you're waiting for this team to win because every single offseason and right before the regular season starts, there are a multitude of analysts who say it's the Chargers' year. They're finally going to win the division. Justin Herbert is finally going to win an MVP and look out for the Chargers. And then every single year it doesn't work out. Well, it needs to work out now because there's real pressure here. You have Jim Harbaugh, one of the better head coaches. You have Herbert, one of the better quarterbacks. The Chargers need to win double-digit football games immediately. Jim Harbaugh is attempting to do something only 3 other coaches have done in the history of football, win a national championship and a Super Bowl title. And the 3 are Jimmy Johnson with Miami and the Cowboys, Barry Switzer with Oklahoma and the Cowboys, and Pete Carroll with USC and the Seahawks. And I do think that would be a great achievement because it proves he can win on both levels. There are so many great college football head coaches who haven't won the Super Bowl or haven't been good good NFL coaches at all. The big names, Nick Saban, we're all praising him because he retired. It didn't work out with the Miami Dolphins at all. Nobody remembers his time with the Dolphins. We're all talking about his college football. Urban Meyer with the Jaguars. I mean, has there been a worse coaching job ever done in the history of football? Steve Spurrier with the Washington football team was an absolute failure. Now, Jim Harbaugh did the opposite. He had success in the NFL, and then he went and won. So he does have a leg up, but still it would end up being a super impressive. But I wonder how much college football has changed him and how that's going to affect his new NFL career. Like, is he going to act like the alpha dog like he was in college? Because in college, the coach is everything. Now he's back to dealing with multi-millionaire athletes who don't respect head coaches as much as they do in college. Here's my take. Right now, this is absolutely the best coaching hire of the offseason so far. This is an established coach. He's a winner. Wherever he goes, he wins football games. No matter how long he's there, no matter if he's successful, no matter if he wins a Super Bowl, he's going to win football games with the LA Chargers. I think you can bank on that. I believe they're going to win double-digit games next season. I could see the Chargers winning 11, 12 games next year. They have Herbert. Now they have Harbaugh. They have a really good head coach. The other coaching hirings, I don't know how they're going to play out. Gerard Mayo with the Patriots sounds like a good idea. He's going to have a long leash, but in the first year, I don't think that's going to be all that. Raheem Morris with the Falcons. Yes, the Falcons haven't done good on offense. Raheem Morris makes sense, but it didn't work out with him with the Buccaneers. And I'm done saying that a guy's second stint is going to go well because I did that with Josh McDaniels with the Raiders and it didn't work out at all. So I'm a wait and see on Raheem Morris with the I do believe there are a number of teams who are going to regret the fact that they didn't hire Bill Belichick or they didn't hire Mike Vrabel, and I don't know if that's going to end up being the Chargers. I think this was the right pick because the Chargers needed a head coach that's going to get everyone excited. Nobody's going to be all that excited about Bill Belichick because the last 4 years haven't been good for him. He's viewed as a Patriot. I think he needs to wait a while to pick his next job. I don't know why the Falcons didn't go with him, probably because they don't view themselves as a win-now team. Bill Belichick needs to go to a win-now. Again, I might be falling for the same trap that everyone falls for every year with the Chargers, but I do feel like there's a real opening this next year for the Chargers to be one of the best teams in the AFC because there's a lot of teams that are going on the downside. Like, I don't know what the Chiefs are going to be like next season. There's talks about Andy Reid retiring. Adam Schefter is saying that Matt Nagy might be the next head coach of the Chiefs. Sorry if that doesn't get me excited, but Matt Nagy failed in. And yeah, I might be talking about the eventual Super Bowl winners, but I don't like where the Chiefs are headed. Travis Kelce is going to be retired before you know it. He maybe has 2 or 3 more years of being the best tight end in all of football. Patrick Mahomes cannot carry the entire load. That is how great quarterbacks end up not winning the Super Bowl. Look at Peyton Manning. Each and every year he had to do everything for the Colts. At some point it gets to the Bills are aging out. There's a real opportunity for the Chargers to be one of the top 3 teams in the AFC next year. I know it sounds crazy to say, but on paper they have the talent. Now they have the coaching. If you really view Jim Harbaugh as one of the best coaches in all of football, then you should view this as going to be successful, and that's how I view this. I think this is going to work out for Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. How long it's going to work out, I don't know. Like the Niners, it really for 3 seasons, and then the 4th and final season was bumpy. But everywhere this guy goes, they've won big football games. With Stanford when he was coaching Andrew Luck, Michigan, of course, and San Francisco. I think it's going to work out for the Chargers. History is on their side. This guy wins football games no matter where he goes, whether you like the big personality or not, whether you're rooting for him, whether you think he's a cheater. All he does is win football games, and it's about time for the Chargers to start winning football games. But like I said earlier, the coach isn't everything. The team around him also has to improve. The Chargers should definitely be in on T. Higgins. I think that would be a move that would really get me excited about next season for the Chargers. But this is a good start to their offseason. They brought in an established winning head coach who's going to bring a lot to that team and to that fan base. And at some point, this team needs to become a team that instead of underachieving, overachieves for one moment in their entire existence. They need to surprise people. And I feel like next year could be the year where you look up and all of a sudden the Chargers have 13 wins. In the immortal words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, go Chargers, go. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please rate, review, and subscribe.